Welcome, everybody, to the Week 11 edition of the Football Diehards DFS show. We're here with you a day early for this week, Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Usually we come to you on Saturdays, but my friend Eric here is taking the family in the old four-wheel drive sleigh, shipping off to, what's the Christmas vacation quote there, Eric? I was planning to get it right, but I couldn't do it. But yeah, we're going a day early, breaking down the entire Week 11 slate. I want to first give a shout out to Drew Phelps for filling in for me last week. I took the high school band to 100th anniversary of the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial, in Washington, D.C., which was a fabulous experience. But I'm glad to be back at it for Week 11 for DFS. So I'm joined by Eric, my amazing co-host at Fantasy Nav, Fantasy NAV. Eric, how's it going tonight?
It's going well. Bit busy on the home front, right? Gearing up for some holiday travel, but excited to jump into the Week 11 slate a day early. There are a lot of really interesting games on this week's slate, so looking forward to diving in.
So where is it you're going, Eric, for Thanksgiving this year?
I am heading to sunny Lake Tahoe. Not sunny at all. It should be snowing the whole time we're there, so we should have a good time.
Well, nothing at all like that's really cool. I've never been there, but nothing at all like the Bills. I mean, when I checked today, they were saying Orchard Park had 54 inches of snow, and it's meant to snow. It's meant to snow through Sunday. So we'll get to that game. They've moved it to Ford Field, a domed environment in Detroit, which is going to make that way more appetizing from a fantasy standpoint. And we will definitely get to that game. Actually, nope, we're going to get to that next. So we're going to get to a lot of the entire Week 11 slate. We have 4 teams on bye and some big-time injuries that is affecting everything right now. So, again, if you're joining us, I hope our audience is as good. We usually have a nice group of people that come in with their questions. Hopefully they caught it on Twitter that we're there a day early. But, again, if you missed this, it's going to be up on Football Diehards. The link will drop right after the show. So we'll cover all the games. We'll take any of your questions. But without further ado, you ready to get down to it, Eric?
Yeah, let's jump.
All right. So, again, like I said, we've got 11 games, and we're going to start with not one that we would have probably thought on Week 11 of the NFL season coming into this. I mean, you get your Bills, Chiefs, and your Chargers. I don't know, Rams. There's these are the ones that we were looking, Bucks that we were looking to be the premier games. But the one that is giving us a lot of ammunition for DFS and in single season long alike is the Chicago Bears against the Atlanta Falcons. We've got an over/under of 50. And, of course, the highlight here is Justin Fields, who all of a sudden has not only gone from fantasy bust to fantasy playable, but he has entered the elite of fantasy quarterbacks. He's currently the QB4 on the season after going absolutely bonkers the last few weeks. So the last 4 weeks, he finished QB5 in New England, finished QB5 in Dallas, and then the last 2 weeks against Miami and Detroit, he was the overall QB1 by quite a lot, of course. I mean, they are designing runs for him. The offense has completely changed to work around Fields. They've turned him into Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts or whoever you want to compare him to. So, I mean, for season long, it's an easy choice. He is an upper tier QB1. You're starting him over most quarterbacks. I had a nice little discussion about that on Twitter with people. Of course, I've neglected to mention I was talking about fantasy. It sparked a lot of arguments with real life quarterbacks with them saying, and I couldn't understand why people were saying I'd start like 25 quarterbacks over him. What are you talking about? But yeah, for fantasy, it's a different story. So for DFS, though, Eric, a couple weeks ago, we had a bargain with Fields at 5,300. I'm going to check the pricing, the pricing trajectory that he's gone through so far. But, long story short, we've got him now, I guess you could call him fully priced at 7,600. So the first question I'm going to pose to you here is, How are you treating him in DFS? Do you think he's still cash playable at that price? In GPP, I think it's pretty clear he is, but how are you using him if you are using him?
I think it's yes to both. I think he's certainly still in the cash radar, right? I mean, we've talked about it ad nauseum at this point, right? The quarterback that is going to catch you with their legs is the cheat code in this game, and those quarterbacks that do it week in and week out are usually in like the low to mid 8K range. So while Justin Fields' price is skyrocketing, 7.6K is still a pretty solid value on him. In the tournament next, really interesting. There's a player on his team that is draw a lot of ownership, that being David Montgomery, in light of the Khalil Herbert news. So finding ways to pair Justin Fields with some of the lesser owned or less popular options for the Bears is really going to be a pretty big key to the slate, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And the Herbert news really kind of threw me a little bit because we're showing pretty significant rostership percentages from both of these players right now. Where are you at on playing them together, Fields and Montgomery?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. On its face, I don't really love it, other than it's gonna be an unlikely pairing, right? So you will create a bit of leverage on the field by having those two together. The usage for Montgomery is a little bit of ahead. His volume certainly should increase, but in catching the same quantity of passes that he has in years past, right? So, whether or not he can, he just kind of gobbles up all of those targets and can get kind of the double production from his work as a pass catcher is somewhat of an open question. I think he'll probably see an uptick there, but pairing those two together isn't going to be a very popular choice, but it's not without its risks either.
Yeah, I agree as well. And right now, in my early picks, I've chosen Montgomery because there are a lot of cheat quarterbacks, which we'll get into as we break down this entire slate. I do think you need one of them in a cash lineup, just simply because you're talking about this. This game is interesting because it's got such a high over under, which usually, I mean, 50 is not breaking the slate high, but I mean for these two teams, it's high, and it's I think the highest one on the slate. There might be, I haven't checked the Bills Browns today since they've moved it to Detroit, so I'll kind of give that a look before we get to it. But it's at least one of the top two games on the slate and over under, which is odd to me because that's usually a pass heavy game that promotes such a high over under. And the Bears and the Falcons are first and second in the league in rushing yards. So it's interesting to me that we're setting up for a track meet when we don't have passing teams. So I mean, if you're looking at the matchups, some of the Bears a little bit more. If you're looking at the matchups and you do play Fields in that GPP, what pass catchers are you likely to pair him with? I mean, you've got Mooney, who is leading Chicago in pretty much every relevant receiving stat, targets, catches, yards, air yards, everything like that. But you've also got Cole Kmet, who's got 5 touchdowns over the last 3 games, and they're finally designing, plays for him, especially in the red zone. So how would you go about pairing Fields in GPPs?
Yeah, I think the line for that I want to take with Fields is really trying to overload stack him. In this hot streak that he's been going on, really he hasn't been supporting more than one pass catcher, right? So, like you mentioned, it's by and large been been Cole Kmet. So I think to get to Kmet and Mooney, to get to Kmet and Chase Claypool is going to be a really unique combination. The thing that's kind of surprising to me, I'm not sure what you're seeing on your side. I'm seeing Cole Kmet in the low single digits in terms of rostership. Maybe that has to do with the questionable tag next to his name. But at 4.1K, I would expect him to be far more popular, pushing that kind of 8 to 10% range. If down in this range, I'll certainly be well overweight to the field, but I'm trying to get my edge by trotting out field net and another pass catcher for the Bears.
Yeah, and that's a good showdown thing that I always do too. Generally the field comes in with those single stacks, and you get leverage with the double stacks. Like even if it seems like you're not, like it doesn't, even if you have, I'm trying to think of an example here, like a Brady, Godwin, Mike Evans stack. It seems like when people stack Brady, they're going to do it with those double receivers. But if you look at data, the field really doesn't do that. They pick one based on the matchup, and they go by that. So I like that idea a lot. And I too that as I'm looking right now, it still is not showing Komet to be very popular at all, which is very surprising to me. I'm seeing similarly priced tight ends showing a lot more rostership than him. Dalton Schultz, Tyler Higbee, Pat Freiermuth are all showing more ownership than him. Even the cheaper ones like Hayden Hurst and Greg Dulcich are as well. Dawson Knox at 3.2 is showing more. Even Kyle Pitts at 4,400 right now. So if that's the case, I love that in GPP. I went into the week thinking he was going to be my cash tight end, but that's going to be that's not at that rostership. I think that's more of a GPP play. So how about the Atlanta side? We've got, again, this is a very similar archetype team. You've got a running quarterback, you've got a pretty condensed offense. It's a run first team, and they've had success using the ground game rather than through the air, especially since with Cordarrelle Patterson on the field. So let's start with Marcus Mariota here. That I think at 5,500 he enters the conversation absolutely for cash. The rostership is not totally reflecting that right now, but at 5,500, if you want to go cheap there, I like him against this Bears defense, who over the last 3 games have given up 9.5 yards per attempt, and that's to Tua, Dak, and Jared Goff. Okay, so if there is some passing in this game, Mariota does have a good matchup. He's another one, although not Fields' upside on the ground, but does have that rushing floor that you want from those quarterbacks. So I do think Mariota is a good option in cash and GPP. What about the rest of the Falcons for you? Is there anybody that's sticking out to you to use in this game, either in the cash setting or as part of maybe even a stack or a bring back to a Bears stack?
Yeah, so I agree that Mariota's on the cash radar. I see him pushing 10% rostership, which is relatively popular for a quarterback, right? We don't see these 20% guys unless someone's just flatly mispriced. For the rest of the Falcons, I think there's some really interesting leverage here. Drake London continues to win on the vast majority of routes that he's running, right? The real question is the volume of passing in this offense. It's kind of ebbed and flowed throughout the when you were talking matchup for Mariota. I think the point to underscore is that Chicago throughout the season, from a fantasy points per game standpoint, has been kind of an average to a somewhat bad matchup according to the fantasy points they've surrendered. But actually, over the course of this recent stretch, Chicago has picked up their pace of play, and in turn, the pace of the games that they're in has increased dramatically. And you're starting to see those fantasy points allowed stats walk up in kind, right? So I do think this is a matchup that you can take advantage of. Drake London is going to see a fair amount of Jalen Jones on Sunday. He's allowing a catch rate at 87%, right? So I do expect Drake London to be able to haul in a lot of passes. Is a little bit of a pace-up spot for the Falcons all of a sudden. The second name that comes to mind, I'm kind of pot committed with this guy, Kyle Pitts, right? He is still a large part of this offense on percentage, right? He plays a very big role in the Falcons offense. If I'm betting on the high tide raising the ship for Drake London, I'm doing the same thing for Kyle Pitts. And again, this is someone that's sitting around 2% rostership in terms of the projection I'm looking at. So one to keep an eye. This is going to be a popular game overall, but there are several guys with game-breaking skill sets that are going to be in the low single digits, and those are going to be my priorities in attacking this game.
Yeah, I like it. And it's a fun one to attack, too. It's like, it's one of those bad team potential shootout games, but it's just so unusual to me, not through the air with this one. So it's an interesting one. I think there's multiple ways. I think you hit on all the right notes with the Falcons team there, too. So yeah, that's kind of the Bears, the Bears Falcons for us. And I like starting with that one, too, because it's complex. It's many layered. We're going to get into a little bit more of a straightforward one right now, but we got some questions. I want to welcome in our listeners, our viewers. Thank you for joining us on a Friday night here, for sticking with us on our new time for the week. So we've got Steven Crowder. Let's take some questions here before we go on. So we've got Steven Crowder, who is one of our regulars. Antonio Gibson, or I'm not sure who B. Wilson is. Unless I'm just stupid and I can't, and I'm just missing a player there.
Is that
Steven? If you
Garrett Wilson?
Yeah, Wilson? Maybe Garrett Wilson. Yeah. Here, Steven, if you want to clarify that in the chat, we'll take your second one here first. So this is a cash game question. So Pickens or Peoples-Jones in cash? I'm assuming this is DraftKings, so we're going to go with full PPR on this one. What's your take on that one? We're going to get to the Browns next with the Bills. So Peoples-Jones or Pickens for you?
I'm probably going to go Pickens here. Jordan Poyer being out for the Buffalo Bills is a detriment to their defense. We're not entirely sure if he's going to play on Sunday yet. But even with him gone, it's still a very tough matchup for opposing wide receivers. And Pittsburgh is finding ways to get the ball into George Pickens' hand. We saw that rush attempt last week, right? So he seems to be a priority for them on offense. And it's incrementally more favorable matches of the Bengals secondary relative to the Buffalo Bills.
I agree. I'm also going to throw in the little caveat there to that question that I don't think either of them are cash plays. Peoples-Jones' volume lately has said otherwise, but like you said, even without Jordan Poyer, the Bills have that blanketing coverage that just takes away the deep ball, which really hurts him. I'm not saying he's not a good play. We'll talk about him in a minute, but I don't think he's a cash play. I think he's got the ceiling for GPP if he can get free, but I don't think he's a cash play there. And I think Pickens' price is too high relative to some of the higher rostered players in that setting there too. But I would agree Pickens with you if I was going for a better floor of the two. All right, and then he clarified the other one. Oh, that was B. Robinson. So Brian Robinson or Antonio Gibson in GPP. I don't. This is going to be kind of a wishy-washy answer, but I think both. I think both are good, and I think you can kind of throw that around a little bit in the mass multi-enter. I think if you're picking a single entry there, you're going to go with the cheaper one. Which is Brian Robinson at 5,300 after he got 2 carries. This is the nuts matchup against Houston, who just gets decimated by running backs every single week. I think, if you're going to take the game script there, that Washington will win this game. That favors Robinson a lot. Antonio Gibson profiles as the pass catching back. But I think they both have value. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, I'm probably going to let the rostership dictate this decision. I'm kind of surprised to see both of these guys in the 5% or below range, just given how much we've made attacking the Texans against opposing running backs, right? But right now, I see Robinson at about 3.5% relative to Gibson's 5.5%. So that would be my lean. And also, I'm buying into the game script narrative that you're laying out there. Last week, when that was the case, that netted Brian Robinson 26 carries on just 50% of snaps, right? So It's not like he, dramatically outsnapped Antonio Gibson. He was in an even split and saw 26 carries. So I think that is a very well represented outcome on the range for Brian Robinson this week, and it's just such a beautiful matchup.
Yeah, yes, and I will double down on my suggestion of just simple MMEing there and using them both. But yeah, that's a good question. I'm glad we got some DFS questions here. We will get to the rest of them shortly. We're going to get to the next game first, which is the Bills Browns. Which I looked while you were talking on a couple of things just so I had it ready. So the game total on this started at 42.5, and as of right now it is 49.5 since it's been moved to Ford Field. So this is all of a sudden one of the best fantasy games on the schedule. So let's start with the Bills, who are, have been, for the most part, fantasy gold all year. I mean, Josh Allen's been fantasy gold, and Stephon Diggs has been as well. The rest of them have been a little bit hit or miss. So let's start with the two of them right there. Josh Allen, 8,500 is the highest priced quarterback. He's $900 more than the aforementioned Justin Fields. Stephon Diggs has a history of killing it at Ford Field. So, I think you got to be looking at him too. How are you treating these guys at their full prices?
Yeah, I don't know if we can get up to paying up for both of these guys. The sort of underlying theme here, if I'm playing Josh Allen, I really do want to be playing Stephon Diggs. So to essentially be rostering the Price King or near to it at two of the positions in the build, it just makes the rest of the construction really, really difficult. You have to get really lean with your spending, right? It's not entirely ruled out, but as I've been playing around with some builds here, I don't feel super confident in the rest of my construction when I have these two playing together. In isolation, you can certainly play Josh Allen in cash. He's very expensive, but he's got a very good path to value. I certainly wouldn't play him naked in the tournament context, but you can do that with Stephon Diggs, and he's got a pretty solid matchup, right? The Browns are relatively favorable in terms of fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, in terms of their catch rate to the position. Stephon Diggs moves around a lot, so he'll see a fair amount of Emerson and to go along with Denzel Ward. Ward's the toughest matchup there, but he hasn't been playing kind of up to his standard this year. So there's not really a whole lot of resistance that we can forecast in the Brown secondary for Diggs.
So let's play the speculation game here, because it looks as though Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen are both top 3 at their respective positions as far as rostership goes. So, part of what we want to do here is kind of guess, when we talk about rostership and who's chalk and who's not, a lot of times you can kind of get a sense of, if a cheap guy is chalk, who are people spending that money on? So, as of right now, there aren't really any chalky cheap values. So if people are playing that Allen Diggs combo, where are they saving that money? I mean, is it all cheap wide receivers? I mean, we've got some, we've got several sub 5K wide receivers. We've got a cheap defense. Is that enough for you to sacrifice several of these amazing mid-tier running backs that we haven't yet discussed to get that Allen Diggs stack just in cash?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I was driving at, right? Like the budget gets real tight very quickly elsewhere, and there are so many guys in that kind of mid tier or lower high tier, bottom of the high tier, that are just in absolute dream spots that I personally don't want to be up on. I mean to that point, and we'll see how rostership shakes out as we get closer to Sunday, but. I mean, I'm assuming most people are doing a similar calculus, so maybe paying up to stack these two together is a really unique way to get an edge on the field. But it gets really difficult to piece together a roster that I can feel confident in with those two up top.
Yeah, I mean it's 47 42 per player if you have both of those guys in your lineup and nobody else. I mean, when you add something like, I'm kind of doing it as we go along here. When you add the Steelers defense, which is a popular cheap one at 2300, it raises it to 5150. But again, that's still not anything that is opening up opening up any pass for you to be playing like two or three of these 6,500 to 7K running backs that are really kind of popping on this slate. So I think we're in lockstep here that we're okay with it, but it's not an aggressive move that I think you have to make. What about the rest of the Bills? The team is sporting a 28.5 or 29.5 now, over under, which again, it just invites all kinds of stacks in here. So if it's Alan Diggs, who are you kind of adding on to that? Or if you want to go away from Diggs to maybe, get a little bit of leverage if he's going to maintain that type of rostership, who else would you stack Allen with in this game?
Yeah, I don't know if I would go as far to stack Allen with Devin Singletary, but that's the next player that really pops off the page for me.
Same.
Pretty steady workload in Buffalo. In spite of the acquisition of Nyheim Hines and more wear and tear and tread coming off of his tires, and this matchup against Cleveland is phenomenal, right? We talk about the Texans being the absolute nuts in terms of match running backs. Cleveland's right there, right? They're allowing 30 points per game to opposing running backs relative to Houston's 32. They're allowing 5.2 yards per carry. They're allowing a lot of passes to be caught out of the backfield, right? So there's a lot of things to like about what Devin Singletary brings to the table, and he's another guy that's kind of in that mid-single-digit rostership, right? So you talk about Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen being near the top of rostership. A real good way to get leverage if you do want to attack this game is to get over to Devin Singletary.
I love it, and if you look at it, there's no reason not to, because he had 72% snap share last week. The Bills clearly don't trust James Cook yet, and Nyheim Hines just involved yet right now. I would imagine that he's going to be worked into that offense, but they're just not incorporating him right now. And you said all the things about that Browns defense there, that they are definitely the one that you want to be attacking with running backs all season. How about on the Browns side? We already kind of touched on Donovan Peoples-Jones, who has been good. He was in my cash lineup last week, which won. And he has been good. I think the dome helps him, with the kind of the speed on the ground there. I have the same misgivings that I had when I answered my version of his question there about whether to play him in cash. I do think he's a good GPP play. But what about the running backs here for you? The Bills started off very strong against the run, but the last 3 games, they've given up 174 yards on the ground to the Jets, 147 to the Vikings, and then 208 to the Packers. So are you a Chubb stan in this one, even with the 9.5-point underdogs?
Yeah, I don't. It's hard to get a read on this one. I think we've seen the Bills defense come back to earth a little bit against the run, as you detailed. I think part of that shift is also tied to game script, right? The first 8 or so games of the season, Buffalo was just absolutely boat racing everybody, and nobody really had an opportunity to run on them. Now they've been in far closer games. So I think the answer lies somewhere in between those two. Chubb is a fine play, right? Pound for pound, one of the best runners in the league. For me, the price tag is a bit prohibitive. His rostership is fine. As I as I talk through the line of thinking on this game, I might actually find myself with a build where I throw a dart the largest of GPPs in terms of field and really spend up on Diggs, Chubb, Josh Allen combination. It'll be ugly on the rest of that roster, but on the merits of his circumstance, he's a fine play. I don't know how I'm going to get to him in multitude at 8.2K.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow. I mean, when you look at some of these running backs that are below him, that Jonathan Taylor is 400 less, and Dalvin Cook is 200. Only Barkley is more expensive than Chubb from the running back perspective.
Right.
So yeah, that's a tough one to do. And I'm gonna add that to my little my little pricing stack here before we move on to the question. So that leaves you 41.66 per player with an Allen Chubb Diggs stack. So that's going to take some creativity to fill out that roster. So, but there are, they exist, and maybe with some injury reports, they'll exist even more. So, that's something to examine as well. All right. So Bills Browns, remember it's in Detroit. The Bills will be staying there and playing the Lions on Thanksgiving there. So it's probably a good move by the NFL to do that. So before we move on, let's get to a couple other questions in the chat. So we've got Clamped EZ. Pick one. No context on PPR. Tony, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Rondale Moore. I hate what a good spot Tony is in this week. It's really going to... I mean, I was okay with the Giants trading him, but this is really going to bug me if he goes off this week. So what do you think of those? Tony, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Rondale Moore.
Yeah, I'll twist the knife a little bit. I'm actually going Kadarius Tony. Very favorable matchup, and several guys in front of him on the depth chart that are going to be out. So this is his moment.
Yeah, Juju and McCole Hardman. I mean, I will say, and this is not just the Giant fan and me wanting Tony to fail. I will say that the biggest beneficiary here is Travis Kelce, not Tony. But, I mean, he's the wide receiver 1 or 2. Okay, 1A with Valdez-Scantling. So, yeah, Tony's my pick there, too. I would like to say DJ Moore, but he's been garbage with Baker Mayfield. I really want no part of him in DFS or season long this week. So that I'm with you on Tony there. Another Chiefs question on the chat from Hudbolt12. Best Chiefs running back rest of season full PPR. I'll take this one first because I was actually researching the guy a lot this week. And I understand that the usage is frustrating, but I'm sticking with Pacheco on this. Just as a couple of things to keep in mind on Pacheco is his 4.7 yards per carry by a rookie is tied with Dameon Pierce and only 0.2 behind Kenneth Walker. So he's running with the same kind of burst as them on a high-powered offense. By the way, he's facing the Chargers, who are giving up the highest yards per carry this week. And he's averaging 5.3 yards per carry in every game that he has rushed the ball at least 8 times. So I understand McKinnon's role in the passing game and the fact that Pacheco is not, but Pacheco is the guy I would want. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. We talked a little bit about it in the context of the Washington backfield, but Isaiah Pacheco saw 16 carries on less than 60% of snaps last week. And while McKinnon is certainly the more likely passing down back, Pacheco ran a high route, 16 routes that he ran as well, right? So, we typically see rookie running backs tend to come on more and more as the season drags on, coming out of a bye week. This is very much so that window for Pacheco. I think the only qualifier to that is I don't think there's going to be really anyone in this Kansas City backfield that is going to be like a league winner from a fantasy perspective. But I do think Pacheco's role will continue to expand, and he will be the better of the Chiefs' options.
Yep. So there's that. We're together on that one as well. Let's take one more in the chat before we move on. We're going to kind of have to go rapid fire with the rest of these games because we do have 9 more to cover here and we want to get to everyone. But Few24U, what the hell do I do with Swift? Trade him, keep him in my dynasty, hoping he'll return to greatness, or just drop his ass? Well, you're not just dropping Swift. I don't think you're trading him right now either because there's panic over his injury. So, I mean, that to me is a hold, right? I mean, you can't do anything else.
Yeah, like a true teacher, process of elimination. The only choice is the one that is the one where you're holding on to him.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. This is 2 years in a row now that he had a high ADP and he was paying it off, and then the injury bug hit. So I get it. Maybe wait if they turn him loose a bit. But I mean, Jamal Williams is now out snapping him and out rushing him. But if they turn him loose and he gets a good one, maybe you try and trade him then. But you're not getting full value right now. So right now it's a hold, and it's a frustrating hold. All right, so moving on to an intriguing game in the late slate, the Cowboys and the Vikings. I will be rooting heavily for Minnesota in this one from a fan standpoint. But this is a close spread with a 47.5 over-under. So let's start with Dallas, who has a resurged Dak Prescott finishing QB4 against the Bears, QB7 against the Packers. Minnesota's given up the second highest yards per pass attempt behind only Detroit. So, and this one is also in a dome. So let's start with the passing game because it looks like we've got Ezekiel Elliott coming back and killing the Tony Pollard value that we've enjoyed for the past 2 weeks. What about the Dallas passing game? I think there's a couple of good options here, most notably in CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz. So what do you think about them today or for Sunday?
Yeah, those are definitely the marquee names. I mean, we'll start with Lamb, right? He's coming off of that huge game last week. Not really seeing much change in his price tag overall, although he should be priced as an elite wide receiver. And his matchup this week, I mean, couldn't be more favorable, right? He runs out of the slot a lot, so we'll see amount of Sullivan. Sullivan's a player that's allowing an 84% catch rate. He's allowing 1.65 yards per route covered. So every time that he backpedals, on average, the person that he's covering gets 1.65. He's an absolute turnstile back there. CeeDee Lamb should absolutely be able to eat. And the second name of note is the one that you mentioned, Dalton Schultz. Looks like he's going to be a little bit popular in kind of a condensed tight end market, but very much so has the benefit of favorable matchups. Really seems to be kind of settling back into the role that we knew him to have last year. So his arrow is definitely pointing up, and he needs to be in your player pool for this week.
And looks like we're showing Dak as the most popular quarterback play on the slate right now, which I'm fine with. I mean, it's 6,600. What he's done, what that offense is, and the matchup that we're seeing against Minnesota, I like it. I like him as a floor ceiling combination. I'm going to segue away from Dallas for a second right now into Minnesota, because I'm in a bit of a dilemma because right now I have Cousins in my placeholder as the cash quarterback. And the reason why is he's got 90 throwing attempts over the past 2 weeks. He is far too cheap for his volume at 6,100. However, recognizing the fact that the Cowboys defense that he's facing has the most sacks in the NFL, has given up only 5.8 yards per attempt, which is the third fewest in the NFL. So what's your take on Cousins? I'm curious because as the week has gone on, I'm thinking that I'm too high on him. So what's your thought on Cousins, passing options aside with him?
Yeah, I think you laid out the case for why I have some concern with Kirk Cousins, right? You mentioned the ability for the Cowboys to get to the quarterback. Not only leading the sack, I think they're fourth in the league in pressure applied to opposing quarterbacks. And Kirk Cousins' completion percentage is like 45% when under pressure. So I think there are just enough mitigating circumstances to where he's a little too risky for me in cash.
Yeah, which is irritating to me too, because I mean, 6,100 is such a value for the guy.
Yeah.
What about, if we're kind of concerned about Kirk Cousins, should we be concerned about Justin Jefferson, who is on an unbelievable tear right now? The talk for wide receiver has been Tyreek Hill, who is on pace for the first 2,000-yard season in the NFL. But I mean, look at what Justin Jefferson is doing. 29 targets over his last 2 weeks. And Dallas, while they do pressure the quarterback, is vulnerable to wide receivers. So what's your take on Jefferson?
Yeah, to your specific question, no, this does not cause any concern for me with Justin Jefferson, right? I mean, he's just an absolutely elite player at the position. You started to lead into it, or at least build the foundation with Justin Jefferson specifically. Since they've acquired T.J. Hawkinson, his average depth of target has exploded. His air yards has exploded. He's had 185 and 211 air yards in the last 2 games. This offense is really, and with Hawkinson therein, it's keeping people honest over the middle, and that's allowing Jefferson to really shine down the field. So a few more sacks, a bit more pressure for Kirk Cousins, does cap his upside, but I do think that he will still take his shots, and specifically when under pressure, we see quarterbacks do it all the time where they tend to go to that safety blanket, right? That release valve. So if you have limited time and you need to get rid of the ball, I would be getting rid of the ball in the direction of Justin Jefferson. I think that would likely be the case for Kirk tomorrow or Sunday as well.
I agree, and I'm trying to find. I think I have him as my overall wide receiver 1 for the week. I know that's not a hot take, but I mean there are many other receivers that vie for that position on a week-to-week basis. But especially with Cooper Kupp out, I think he's the guy that you look to this week. You mentioned Hawkinson. Anything else you want to throw in? He's I'm looking, apart from Mark Andrews, who is still questionable on this slate. If Andrews is out, Hawkinson is the most expensive tight end on the main slate. 19 targets though since being acquired by in the 2 games since being acquired by Minnesota. Is he at that price tag, or is that getting too much?
No, I actually kind of like it, and specifically in the context of if you're targeting this game, getting to a player that's going to be 1/4 as popular as the other kind of name brand options, but is still seeing near double digit targets on average is a very, very appealing proposition, right? The matchup isn't quite as favorable for TJ Hawkinson as it is for the wide receivers on the Vikings, but I still think that he'll be able to eat. He'll still see a high target volume, and he should be able to haul in a good percentage of those.
Yeah, why not? I think this is a fun game to stack. More so on the Dallas side with Minnesota bringbacks, but I think this is a good GPP game to play. All right, so moving on here a little bit. The Giants. I get to talk about the Giants in a favorable standpoint. My 7-2 Giants playing Detroit, who is a matchup that we've attacked all season long, albeit a little bit different. I mean, I'll start with Saquon Barkley, who is an eruption play here. They're home favorites. The Lions' pass defense is the one that gets all the negative attention, but their running defense has been just as bad. They've given up 5 yards per carry. They've given up the 10th most fantasy points per game to running backs, 11 rushing touchdowns. Evan Neal is back, thank goodness, which is great for Barkley's prospects. I think the only thing standing in his way is price. At $8,900, he is the most expensive running back by $700. I think it's easy to cash playable, but kind of along the lines of Josh Allen, is it somebody that you're not finding yourself getting to in the cash standpoint this week?
Yeah, it's going to be tough, right? I think the lesson here is you're going to have to plant your 1, maybe 2 pay up options. But among those options that you're choosing from, chief among them is Saquon Barkley, right? He is in a fantastic spot. Like you mentioned, he's getting a bolster to his offensive line, and while Detroit has been very favorable to opposing wide, they are still quite favorable to opposing running backs, and obviously everything the Giants want to do start and stops with Saquon Barkley.
Rostership is showing people aren't afraid of that price tag as he's coming in as the highest rostered running back on DraftKings. So again, some decisions will have to be made. Let's touch on the passing game here real quick. The Giants' passing game has not been one you use this year, and that's not a matter of their failures. It's just a matter of coaching. You know, they've buckled down and they run their offense through Saquon Barkley. Daniel Jones has been a game manager with rushing upside of his own. But Detroit has given up the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. They've given up the second most rushing yards to quarterbacks. So, I mean, I think it is pretty obvious that Daniel Jones is playable in format. It's just a matter of how you play him. Wan'Dale Robinson is questionable. Kenny Golladay is questionable, but who cares about that anyway? Because he came in finally, he dropped two passes right in his gut, was benched for the rest of the game. I mean, I almost feel bad right now for the guy because he's clearly done. But that aside, with a super thin passing core, how would you treat Daniel Jones if you were playing him?
Yeah, I mean, look, Daniel Jones is a really good path value at 5.7K. This offense is, like I mentioned earlier, going to run through Saquon Barkley, but fortunately for Daniel Jones, a big part of Barkley's game is his ability to catch the ball, and Jones has shown an ability to be opportunistic and take advantage of weak matchups this year. You couple that with the rushing floor. I think he's got the fifth most design runs in the league this year. There are a lot of things to like about Daniel Jones from a catch perspective. It's just very limited side perspective, so it makes it hard to play him in a tournament context, especially with not a whole lot of appeal to his pass catchers other than Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, Darius Slayton has been one of the biggest free agent pickups this week, and rightfully so. I think people are kind of overrating him as far as the cash thing goes. He's struggled with drops in his career as well, and again, this is not, even if he's the Giants wide receiver one come Sunday, the Giants wide receiver one is not other teams wide receiver one. Like you said, this is Barkley and Jones. Barkley and Jones and the defense are going to win them this game. The Giants are not a fantasy friendly football team. So even against the Lions, I think you temper expectations as fantasy standpoint goes, and it's always tough to do that just looking at the matchup. But I think I'm with you here. That Jones and Barkley are the plays from this team. We're getting some more questions here. We'll get to them in a second. Go ahead.
What I'll say on Slayton, right? Like he's certainly the option for New York, but we can't chase last week's production, right? He's got a decent enough matchup, but if you remove that one of broken play touchdown, and he's at a 2 for 40 kind of day, I think that's the far more likely outcome than the 3 for 90 plus and a score that he turned in, right?
Yep. And I'm fine with it in GPP as long as the ownership doesn't get out of hand and people do, like you say, start chasing that thing. But I think we're kind of in agreement on the Giants that it's Barkley, it's Jones. You don't need to go anyplace else. How about the Detroit side? Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? I mean, he's volume central there, especially with Hawkinson gone. 7,200, that's a pretty friendly price tag for him. Are you playing him?
Yeah, it's a volume based argument for sure. So he needs to be in the player pool very, very safe. I said this last week. I think I've said it for several weeks that he's been available. DeAndre Swift will continue to be a breaking darling of mine, right? He doesn't have an injury designation this week. Maybe they unlock him. For him to be sitting at 4% rostership with a skill set that we only have to go back to week 1 to see him really do some electric things. I wouldn't bank on it, right? I'm not going to be 4x the field on Swift, but I will throw a few darts because that week will come, and I want to have a few shares when it does.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's not a cash play, and he's super risky. But I mean, you're right, and this is a matchup is great. 5.4 yards per carry the Giants have allowed. Dexter Lawrence, who is their best render, is playing, but not at 100%, which could factor into that. I think Jamal Williams is also GPP worthy, but I do think you're right that the Swift is the low percentage upside play there. All right, so getting back to, we've got some questions here that have kind of popped up as we go, and then we're going to get to the rest of the games. Let's see. We got a couple of trade questions here. Where am I? I just lost my thing. Okay, A.J. Brown and London for Diggs. That's from Ralphie Salas. Which side do you want on that?
Well, that's tricky. I probably need some more context, but I'll go with the A.J. Brown in London side. I mean, look, it's an incremental increase from A.J. Brown to Stephon Diggs, and this is the time of year where depth really matters, right? It'll boil down to how these rosters are constructed, but I tend to play a little bit more conservatively when it comes to playoff time, so I'll go with the depth.
Yeah, same with me. I think you said it right way. We've got another trade question, which is this one's a little bit bananas here. So I don't know. If I'm going to be able to wrap my head around this one. But from Swavy JP, I was offered Kyler Murray, Tyreek Hill, Dameon Pierce, and Rachaad White for one of Fields and Lamar, Swift, Kenneth Walker, and T. Higgins. That's a big time deal there. So, he says forget Kyler, he's injured. Well, he's questionable. I don't see the need. I don't see the need to do that. I understand that seems like a big time deal, kind of for nothing to me. I think here's what I'll say. I mean, if you have Fields and Lamar, which I've already answered several questions on Twitter, Eric. I don't know about you. If you have Fields and Lamar, I certainly think you need to be making a trade for one of those, but it's not a trade that you get Kyler Murray back in. You're bolstering your depth somewhere else. You do not need a quarterback back because you're going to wind up in the same quandary where you've got a top 10 or even top 5 quarterback riding your bench every week. So I like the idea of trading one of those guys, but not for this one. What about you?
Yeah, that's exactly the sentiment, right? This feels like a trade for the sake of trading, which just typically don't seem to work out all that well. But if this is rooted in needing to get rid of one of these two quarterbacks that's wasting away on your bench, that is the correct mindset. But getting a quarterback in return in that transaction is counterintuitive, right? Go and maximize the skill position players for Fields or Lamar, whichever one you ship out.
Yep, in agreement. And just for context here, he put his team, which is a 10-team PPR, Fields and Lamar at quarterback, Chubb, Etienne, Walker, Swift, Jeff Wilson, Eli Mitchell. Wide receivers are Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, and Michael Pittman. You're stacked there. You didn't list the tight end. Maybe maybe offer Fields and Lamar for one of the top tier tight end, Kelsey or Andrews or something like that if you don't already have one, and see if someone will bite on that just to complete your team. But I mean, you got a championship caliber squad there. All right. So getting back to the DFS, we got about maybe 20 minutes left to get it all. Oh, there's one more in there from Moke. He says, "Do you guys think Cup is coming back this season?" I really don't think. I really can't answer that. I mean, that's gut call is no to me, but just because I think the Rams are going to fall out of it enough and not want to risk his health for next year, but that's based on absolutely nothing that I've ever read or, I'm not in the front office. My gut would say no, but don't take that for anything more than a grain of salt. What do you think?
Yeah, I've got the same reckless speculation, right? I think by the time he's eligible to return, the Rams are going to be very far out of it because they've shipped off so many picks. He is their franchise, so I don't see them,
Mm-hmm.
running any additional unnecessary risk with him. But that is
Yeah.
merely how I would handle it, and there aren't a whole
Right.
lot of me's running around the NFL.
Yeah, right. All right. So moving on to back to our DFS, we got Eagles Colts, which is an interesting one. I was very happy to see Washington give the Eagles their first loss here. Um, so we've talked a lot about Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson in DFS and in season long, but we've got Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. We've got Jalen Hurts, who is still doing what he does. I have not seen a lot of talk about this game. So kind of take it from a game perspective here. Who are some players that you're looking at in this game from either a cash or a GPP perspective, either side?
Yeah, so I talked ad nauseum about this last week. It's not quite as exacerbated as it was, but Jonathan Taylor has no business being sub 8K. He was 7,500 last week. He's 7,800 this week. Also, his ownership is floating right around 10%. That is woefully low. Last week, I had him in 3 or 4% in some places. So any that being the case, right? An elite player who is underpriced, still not getting the attention they deserve, that should be something that perks your ears up. So Jonathan Taylor is firmly on the radar for me. Besides that, I I really think that Philadelphia is going to come out here and try to make a statement, right? Like they had no business losing to the Washington Commanders. They certainly have no business losing to Saturday-led Indianapolis Colts team. And they're really going to come out and try to, make a statement and really try to, keep the pedal to the floor, right? So all of the skill position guys are going to be, in the pool. I think Jalen Hurts is going to be, again out there with a point to prove and be running a fair amount, getting those additional yards for your fantasy scores. So I like a lot about the Philly side, and I'll be paying close attention to where the rostership settles in for Jonathan Taylor come Sunday.
It's unbelievable to me that he's under $8,000. I mean, it seems like it's based on him as an injured player, which he is clearly not anymore. I mean, the way he ran. Did you see the next gen thing on that touchdown, that long touchdown run he had that he ran 21 freaking miles per hour? I mean, is he a horse? What human being can run that fast on an open football field like that? So yeah, 21 miles an hour the guy hit in that one. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to be so overweight on him in GPP. I think he's cash playable actually as well at 7,800 if you can fit him in there. But yeah, GPP, if he settles in there, I don't care if it's a game stack. I'll be all over him even as a one-off. Cash, I want to throw in Paris Campbell as one of the cheap receiver options in this that I really like. Matt Ryan's back as quarterback. The last 3 weeks that Ryan has started, Campbell has 24 catches. So, and also the fact that he plays, he has 70% of his snaps come out of the slot. He's not going to see Darius Slay or James Bradbury on the perimeter. So I think he is really, really a savvy floor play for cash at 4,300 on DraftKings.
In a week,
anything
we're
else
going
on
to
this?
need salary saving. So definitely like the Campbell's
Yeah,
call.
Yep. That's a good one too. And I guess we got to, before we move on to this too, we got to throw in that Dallas Goedert is on IR and Jack Stoll is 2,500. Again, Am I advocating playing him? Not really, but a $2,500 tight end that starts is always worthy of mention on this slate. You look like you want to say something about Stoll there.
I do. I want to give a PSA. Stoll is and has seen more snaps this year, but he is much more of the blocking tight end. So while neither of us are advocating for playing either of these tight ends necessarily, if you must, Calcaterra is probably going to be the one that's going to see more targets. But again, very low floor, and that floor is well represented on their range. So look elsewhere, but if you have to do, I would actually go Calcaterra.
Yep. I like it. So, all right, that is Eagles Colts. Moving right along here, we're going to get to the rest of these games in the next 15 minutes or so. Washington, Houston. Washington coming off that win against the Eagles that we just talked about. They're on a short week, but they are facing a poor team in Houston. We've already kind of touched on the running backs of Gibson and Robinson in this one. So let's kind of look at the passing game here. I really like Terry McLaurin at 5,900 in this one. On paper, this is a bad matchup against, as Houston has only given up the third fewest fantasy points per game to wide receiver. But I do think that, it's a bit of a cosm of how bad they are against the run. McLaurin's volume, though, is really, really, really solid with Heineke as his quarterback. He went 8-128 against Philadelphia in what should have been a terrible matchup for him. 556 the game before that, 6-113 the game before that. Only got one touchdown this year. So at 5,900, what do you think about him in this game? He's in my cash right now.
Yeah, I absolutely love Terry McLaurin this week. To go further on your point, since Taylor Heineke, or rather in games where Taylor Heineke is quarterback, Terry McLaurin is averaging 6 receptions and over 90 yards, right? So like the connection there is real. I think your point about the Texans defense not allowing a lot of fantasy points is spot on, right? They are very much so a run funnel. But I do think, look, we're not at the bottom of the list, and we're talking about the Texans game, right? Like, I do think Houston will be able to score a little bit more in, coming up against this Commanders defense, and that should create more passing opportunity for the Commanders and their pass catchers. McLaurin's going to see Stingley, beating up on a rookie is tested in this league. Stingley's been playing a little bit better lately, but it's still, a matchup that McLaurin should be able to take full advantage of.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with your point on Houston. So we'll segue there. Who do you like on the Houston side? If we're talking about this as a fantasy relevant game, who do you like on the Houston side the most in this one?
Yeah, this is really going to boil down to rostership for me. But right now, I'm looking at Nico Collins. I see him sitting at 3%. Ran 30 routes last week in his first game back. Saw 10 targets. Obviously made his way into the end zone. So I wouldn't be surprised to see his rostership walk up a little bit. But generally speaking, people aren't going out of their way to play Texans players. So maybe it goes to 5%. But ultimately 4.1K, he's one of those, salary saving options that you're going to need. And he showed a connection with Davis Mills down the stretch last year. He's now back and immediately picked up where he left off. There's a lot to like about Nico Collins this week.
Yeah, I like that call. And I'll just throw in as well, Dameon Pierce, his price doesn't move. I understand that they just picked up Benjamin off waivers, which is attention worthy, I guess. But I think Pierce's workload alone warrants playing him at that price tag. This is not the greatest matchup for him against Washington, who is a pretty solid run defense. But he doesn't seem to have any game scripts. Even the Texans losing way more than they're winning has not kept Pierce from averaging over 20 touches per game. So at 6,500, I think he can play him in any format. If his ownership gets too high, which it looks like it is right near the top. I'm just scrolling as we're talking. Yeah, he's the seventh highest rostered running back right now. I think if it stays in that range, I might, call him simply a cash play only. But I think he's fine in any format as well. All right, moving on to Denver, Las Vegas. The battle of, what do we call this game? The battle of is, we got to get a cute name for this. McDaniels with McDaniels against Hackett. The Save My Job Bowl. I think we're past that, right? So let's talk about this from a fantasy perspective. Raiders at Broncos, two very disappointing teams as far as outlook went. The Broncos have a team total of 29, the Raiders 19, which is insane to me given the names that are on the field in this one. But I'll kind of let you take the lead on this first, from just a total game perspective. Who are some plays in this game that you're looking to roster?
Yeah, for me, it really it starts and almost stops. So there's really two names of note for me. The first is Cortland Sutton. It looks like all indications are they're going to be without Jerry Jeudy this week, and
He's out.
Las Vegas was there. We go. Las Vegas was a pretty favorable matchup throughout most of the season, and over this this backslide, they've just been getting absolutely torched in their secondary. So you see the volume uptick with Jerry Jeudy ruled out. You see this you see this glorious matchup. There's a lot of things to like about Cortland Sutton's opportunity here. The second name, Greg Dulcich, week over week, I'm surprised at his price tag. Not garnering more rostership. I see him sub 5 now. He is all tight ends this year in average depth of target, and unfortunately, unrealized air yards. They're looking for him down the field. He narrowly missed one. Been a walk-in touchdown last week. His role in this offense is very quickly gotten firmly cemented. So he will be in the tight end pool for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can play him in cash and GPP. I mean, when you look at this, and he's seeming to be, like you say, less popular than he really should be. It's still under 4,000, but I mean, when you take into context here, even in what looks to be a bad fantasy environment, Judy's out, KJ Hamler's out, Kendall Hinton, who is really next in line for the wide receiver 2 position, is questionable. Sutton should eat up a ton of targets, but I mean, you have to figure that Dulcich is next, right? And even the 1A, if they're keying on Sutton as really the only threat downfield, definitely a problem for the Broncos that their left tackle, right tackle, and center are all on IR. So I think either defense can be played in this game. Then the one thing I'll point out with the Raiders is that Devontae Adams is also questionable. So if he doesn't play, I don't know that I can go anywhere on the Raiders offense. Anything on the Raiders offense that you're looking at?
No. I mean, Jacobs should see a solid workload, but he's going to push to be one of the the chalkier running backs, and with just the tailspin of this entire offense and team, I don't want to be at that price tag or at that exposure in terms of popularity with a team rather that can have many things blow up in their face.
Yeah. I'm probably not going there. And he's been one of my guys all season, but this just isn't the spot, I don't think, in this game. All right, so moving on. Jets in New England. Despite a 38 over-under in this one, I am actually pretty high on a couple of fantasy plays, and I'm curious if you are as well and if there's anyone more. First one being Ramondre Stevenson, who over the last 5 appearances has taken over as the RB1. The Jets have given up the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs, but Stevenson's involvement in in the passing game, and the fact that he has just kind of pushed Damian Harris to a straight backup. 6,700 is one that I really like from him. What are you thinking on Stevenson?
Yeah, it's a pricing play for sure, right? Like he's just offering a ton of value out there. This isn't empirical in nature, but anytime that I find myself feeling confident in a New England running back is right around the
Yeah.
time that Bill Belichick does something wild and makes me eat my words, right?
JJ
But
Taylor is going to get
putting
20
those
carries this
feels,
week.
yeah, exactly right. Someone off the street. So putting those feels aside, Ramondre Stevenson is a very defendable play this week.
And on the Jets side, Garrett Wilson's price tag is a bit puzzling to me at 4,900. Curious on your thoughts on Wilson because Corey Davis is out again. Elijah Moore is the Jets' version of Kenny Golladay apparently now. I just don't get the price tag, honestly. I don't like the matchup. I don't like the game, really, from a fantasy standpoint at a 38 over-under. But, Garrett Wilson pretty much leads the Jets in all relevant targets or all relevant categories now. So 4,900, what are you doing with him there?
Yeah, I have a similar thought, at least, kind of reading between the lines. This feels a little too good to be true. And usually in DFS, it feels that way. It is, right? Assuming that there isn't some, puppet master pulling the strings, 4.9K for a player that is going to lead his team in targets. That, last time he was in this, hauled in 6 passes for 115 yards. There's a lot to like about Wilson on his own right, and then put him in the context of a slate where you need to find some cost savings. He will be one of the guys that I'll go to save some money as I'm finishing out my builds.
Yeah, and I think you put it pretty well there. I mean, it's just so puzzling that you have to wonder what's up there. I will say that I prefer, the play I mentioned, Paris Campbell, a few games ago at 600 cheaper. I prefer him. I think there's less danger with him than there is with Garrett Wilson, but certainly both are viable. Anyone else in this game before we move to the next one? We got 3 more I want to do quick.
No, Jacoby Myers is fine. He runs out of the slot, so won't see sauce, but not someone I'm going out of my way to get into the mix.
Right. Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. All right, so Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. This is a similar idea. I want to like this game a lot more than I do, just simply because Cincinnati is, Cincinnati should be a better offense for fantasy than they are. What's your ultimate take on this game? I think Joe Mixon is the one that's kind of standing out the most as a play at 7,400. It doesn't seem like his price has moved. I think he was 7,200 when he had his 5 touchdown game. You'd think they'd have jacked him up, and they didn't, and that's standing out to me. But other than that, I'm a little bit wary of price tags relative to this game environment. What do you think here?
Yeah, I think the most notable play on this side is one that I mentioned last week, and that is Najee Harris sitting down at 5.5K, right? Like the words I said last week, there's going to be a day where he's going to pay that off in spades, and got pretty close to that last week, right? If it wasn't for a couple of inches of field position, could potentially be an entirely different story, but still saw a season high in carries. So ran the ball 20 times, ran 10 routes, almost got to that 100-yard bonus, finished at 99 yards in total. So, I mean, as long as he's going to be K, I mean, there's going to be merit to playing him. I don't feel super great about it, but I mean that value is just glaring.
Yeah. There was a little bit of a scare that Jaylen Warren was going to kind of cut into him there, but that didn't happen. So the one thing also here is I want to point out, from a cash perspective, one thing we like to do is the first thing you look for is the cheapest defense you can stomach, and that actually is not going to kill you here. And I think we have a pretty good one on the Pittsburgh side. And the fact that I'm probably using the Pittsburgh defense is going to get me off the Cincinnati skill players in cash. And the reason for the Pittsburgh defense, they got back TJ Watt last week. They're getting back Minkah Fitzpatrick this week. Pittsburgh, despite anything that's happening on offense, is still racking up sacks this season. Cincinnati, despite bolstering their offensive line, is still giving up tons of sacks. So I do think in this game, if we're set with a passing perspective here, that we're going to see Pittsburgh pay off that 2,300, and they fit that cash perspective just so easily there. So maybe that's kind of getting me off Cincinnati skill players more than I should, but that's kind of just where I'm sitting as far as the cash build goes. What do you think there?
Yeah, I love the Pittsburgh play. We saw TJ Watt come back last week, and immediately, like literally in the first 5 snaps that he was on the field, he got like 2 pressures and a sack or something like that.
Yeah.
Just completely disrupted the game from the moment that he took the field. In these divisional matchups, you see an understanding of the opposing side a little bit better than you do kind of in matchups across the league. So, Pittsburgh is going to try to find a way to get TJ Watt into those favorable matchups and, to really put the pressure on Joe Burrow. So 2.3K going to be a little bit popular, but, certainly a valid play.
And no Jamar Chase. No Jamar Chase really, downgrades that offense until he comes back. I do like T. Higgins. I do like Tyler Boyd, but Jamar Chase needs to be there for Cincinnati to kind of realize their true ceiling there. And hey, Bob Harris, the great Bob Harris joined us in the chat, says, "You fellows are fantastic." Thank you, Bob. We think you're fantastic as well. Tune into Bob and Mike on Sirius XM NFL. Bob, you can correct me into the chat if I'm getting this wrong, but I think it's 10 to 12, might be 9 to 12. You can put it in, but Sirius XM channel 88, Bob and Mike. I will be on with them at 10:20 tomorrow, talking some more DFS as we get some more news. But let's get to our last game here, and then we'll get to the last question. We've got... I lost it. Where is my thing here? We've got the Rams and the Saints here, which, man, looking at the beginning of the season, looks like it should have been a way more exciting game than it is right now. And here we are at the bottom of the list. Rams with this is a show here. Am I back?
I've got you back now, yeah.
Apologies, everybody. So we've got the Rams without Cooper Kupp, with Stafford coming back, but a banged-up offensive line. We've got the Saints without Michael Thomas, without any real semblance of a quarterback, but some exciting plays on both sides here that I think we can get into here. I don't see anything that I'm looking at as far as a cash game build goes. You can differ with me if you want there, Eric. But what about from a GPP perspective? Is there anything that you're looking at to attack in this game? We've got an under 40, which again is very surprising. But what do you think about this game?
Yeah, cash context. It all starts with Alvin Kamara. Even that's a little pricey, but certainly the most reliable of the options. From a tournament context, it's going to be a circumstance where we watch the projected rostership all the way up to the start of the early games. Really, whichever wide receiver is going to be the least popular for the Rams is probably where I want to focus my attention. If they end up with similar rostership, I kind of like Ben Skoranek. He runs more out of the slot than Allen Robinson or Van Jefferson do. That's very much so the role that is absent with Cooper Kupp off the field. Obviously, Skoranek is not going to step into those shoes, but I'll see comparable opportunity as kind of the primary slot receiver. So if he's near or certainly less pop than Van Jefferson or Allen Robinson. Don't mind throwing a dart, especially at these price tags, right? 3.9K for Skoranek, 4.5K for Van Jefferson. A lot to like with those options, really depending on how rostership falls.
I'm gonna even take your. I think you hit it perfectly, and I think you're even a little too lukewarm on it. I think Skoranek is one of the better GPP values on the slate. I don't know that you can trust him in cash because you just kind of want to stay away from this game in cash because there's just no floor with the total being so low. But I mean, when Kupp went down, he led the Rams in routes run and in targets. And that Saints secondary is absolutely more vulnerable inside than they are on the perimeter too. So I mean, I think you got the right play there, 100%. Tyler Higbee, I think, is fine, but they have been using him kind of in that George Kittle is such a good blocker that when we lose offensive linemen, we need to use him as that. Higbee has been playing that role a little bit. Again, I think he's fine, and his rostership is showing a lot of usage, but I don't think he's someone that you need to lock in just because Kupp is gone. I think Skoranek is probably the best play here, especially with the offensive line being what it is. We're going to be looking for checkdowns over the slot there. So I'm with you on that one. All right. So anyone else on the Saints? What about Chris Olave there before we take one more question and wrap it up?
He's fine, right? He'll certainly be the candidate to lead the Saints in receiving yards. I think the hesitation that you're hearing in my voice regarding Olave is more to do with the state of the Saints passing game, right?
Yep.
It is mixed company quarterbacks that are potentially going to be benched for Jameis Winston because they are throwing too many interceptions. And that's where we are with Andy Dalton, right? So, not a whole lot to feel confident in terms of this passing game for the Saints.
Yeah, and on that note, before we wrap up this game, I will just put a little bow because we like to throw in defenses. I think both of these defenses are very viable in GPP. With their offensive line issues, Aaron Donald should go berserk on New Orleans offensive line that has Andrews Pete, James Hurst, and Eric McCoy all on IR, and the same thing on the other side, the Saints at home against that team with no Cooper Kupp. I think both have GPP winning upside from the defense standpoint. All right, so that is our slate. We have one more question. I think it's a very apropos question to take. This is kind of a a secondary question from Swavy's, that big trade we talked about with trading away one of Fields and Lamar. His follow-up at the end of that, which is one that I've already gotten a few times this week, so we can kind of say it publicly on the show before we end. Fields or Lamar, rest of the season. Where are you on that?
Which one doesn't command a higher price on the trade market is the correct answer. But in a vacuum, I'll go with Lamar, right? What we're seeing out of Justin Fields is an upside that kind of puts him into Lamar Jackson's range, right? And all told, it is a small handful of games, whereas this is really kind of the book on Lamar's upside. So I'll go with the larger sample size and give me Lamar by air.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that one too. I think, and just to kind of curtail what you said there too, which one gets the higher trade package back. I think you're at a point right now where that will be Fields, based on the fact that he has almost 90 fantasy points over the last two games, or it might even be over 90 fantasy points over the last two games. I think, if you are a manager of Lamar Jackson, this is the perfect time to strike and play Fields. Yeah, we got 89.1 fantasy points over the last two games. This is the time to strike on trading Fields in that redraft. Dynasty, that's probably a different question if you're to believe that this is going to happen. All right. Thank you, everybody that brought your questions to the chat and for tuning in for us on this new time for Week 11. We have Thanksgiving games coming next week, so we'll kind of discuss how we're going to bring all the content with you as we go. towards that and to the full Week 12 slate on Sunday. But again, thank you for everybody that brought your questions and for listening to us. Eric, any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, looking forward to this. Looking forward to this slate, and make sure you are tagging Jamie and I in any questions that you have as we get a little bit closer to kickoff.
Eric will be answering that from snowy/sunny Lake Tahoe. Have a safe, fun trip, Eric. Guys, thank you for joining us. We will